Yeah, hey, this shit easy, nigga. Hey, all I'm talking about, nigga, I'm still out here trying to get it.
Contender Regime Boxing, checking back in with y'all, man. What's good? So Keith Thurman did an interview with PBC, which also featured Tim Tszyu. They uploaded it yesterday on Premier Boxing Champions YouTube channel. And, you know, they got to talking about Keith Thurman's career and, you know, how his career unfolded and how it led to where he is right now, having multiple layoffs, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you know, not really being as active, how his performance has pretty much, his performance level has dropped over the years. He hadn't looked as explosive, hadn't looked as strong. And also they spoke on the potential fight with he and Boots Ennis, which we have been covering over the last week or so. And, you know, they also talked about Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. And Keith Thurman, he said a lot of stuff that y'all know, like, I like Keith Thurman as a fighter, and I think he's good for the sport. Just the way he promotes himself, he's entertaining. He gives a good interview. He knows his boxing. But Keith Thurman just does and says a lot of stuff that just really don't make sense. You know, he said that he didn't know who Jerron Boots Ennis is, and then at the same time, he's saying that he need a big-ass payday to fight him. You know, I get it. You know, Keith Thurman, you want to get paid. It's not a huge incentive to fight Jerron Ennis, so I understand why he want to get paid, but it's kind of like a lot of the stuff he says is contradictory. And then when they brought up Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, we know Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, they're in the middle of closing the deal on their fight for Undisputed that should be happening within the next few months later on this year. And Keith Thurman said that Terence Crawford and Errol Spence are holding up the division because they got all the belts. He's saying that if I fight Boots, it got to be for a belt, or it should be for a belt. He's saying that there's a lot of other guys that want to make fights in the division, the young up-and-coming guys, but these fights should all be for belts. And the way Keith Thurman framed it was like he really said this. He said that Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, they're pretty much holding up the division because they got the belts. As if that's the reason why Keith Thurman ain't been active in the last 3 or 4 years. You dig what I'm saying? Even when he had the titles, he wasn't active. He took a 2 or 3 year layoff. And then when he came back, he fought Josecito Lopez. When Errol Spence came back off his layoff, he fought Danny Garcia. Then he had another layoff. He came back and fought Yordenis Ugas. You dig what I'm saying? You see the difference? So it's crazy that Keith Thurman, and it's not unbelievable because Keith Thurman has said outlandish and just ridiculous stuff like this before in his career. This has become the norm for Keith Thurman. But I just find it odd that while Keith Thurman says that Errol Spence and Terence Crawford are holding up the division, in which Keith Thurman had an opportunity to fight both of these guys, had an opportunity to fight Terence Crawford, met with Bob Arum and them, couldn't get the deal done, priced himself out, for all I know. Had ample opportunity to fight Errol Spence. Errol Spence literally ran this dude down, you know, chased him down, and just to no avail. So it's funny that he had an opportunity to fight both of those guys and insert himself into the mix. And then also the irony of the fact that he is a major reason why the division, why it took so long for Errol Spence and Terence Crawford to get to where they at right now to be fighting for Undisputed. Keith Thurman could have been fought Errol Spence. Won, lost, whatever. That's one thing that's out the way. He could have been fought Terence Crawford. Won, lost, whatever. That's one thing out the way, and get on right to it with Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. Meanwhile, you know, Errol Spence had to fight all these other guys when he could have just went straight to Keith Thurman for a unification match. You feel what I'm saying? So it's ironic that Keith Thurman uses this terminology saying that these guys who are fighting for undisputed, who are arguably the two best fighters on the planet, and no debate, whoever wins that fight will be the #1 boxer in the sport, that these guys are holding up the division because they're fighting for the biggest accolade of them all, the greatest accolade of them all in the sport of boxing, especially in a division like welterweight, which is outside of heavyweight the most historic and the most popular, the most glamorous division in the history of the sport of boxing. I just find that's kind of weird to me. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of weird. But I really hope and wish the best for Keith Thurman. I want to see him come back, and I really hope that he buckles down and take that Jerron Boots Ennis fight, because like I said in the previous video, and then we went live on Saturday, Keith Thurman, if he wants to jump that line and put himself in a position to fight an Errol Spence or to fight a Terence Crawford, he has to fight Jerron Ennis. There's literally no other way to skip that line, because Jerron Ennis is up next. Virgil Ortiz is up next. You got to fight somebody like that if you want to skip those guys, because right now people not really even checking for Keith like that. You know, people would rather see Jerron Ennis versus Errol Spence or Jerron Ennis versus Terence Crawford before they want to see the Keith Thurman fight. So if you go out there and you whoop Jerron Ennis, you immediately insert yourself in the mix. But that's the contradictory from Keith Thurman. It's like the way you talking, you want to be back in the mix with the best, but you don't want to take the steps to actually get there. Keith done cried wolf too many times, man, and it's time for him to actually put up now. It's time for him to show us what he really about. Do you really still want to be at the top? Do you really want this shit? Are you really dedicated to the game? You know what I'm saying? Do you really want to be the best? Keith Thurman he sound like a retired fighter that's just, they asking him random questions about boxing. He sound retired. He don't sound like somebody that got that hunger in him. You know what I'm saying? He just throwing little slick shots like he normally do without no type of intention behind it. You know what I'm saying? For years he threw slick shots at Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, but had no intention of fighting either one of them. You know what I'm saying? So y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments, man. If y'all watched that interview, you know, let me know what you think about Keith Thurman's thoughts. Do you agree with him saying that Errol Spence and Terence Crawford holding up the division by trying to make undisputed? And just overall, how do you feel about Keith Thurman and where he is in his career right now? Y'all let me know what y'all think, man. Contender regime boxing. I'll holler at y'all boys, man.